Imagine walking into a store for one very specific reason. You need toothpaste. That's it. Toothpaste. 2 minutes later, you walk out with toothpaste, a candle that smells like a tropical forest after rain, and a snack you didn't know existed 10 minutes ago. You get home, look at the receipt, and think, how did this happen? If that situation sounds even slightly familiar, congratulations, you have a perfectly normal human brain. And your brain, like everyone else's, is extremely good at convincing you to spend money. So today, we're not talking about complicated investing strategies or stock market charts. Instead, we're diving into something much more powerful and much more relatable: the psychology of spending. Because most financial decisions don't start with a calculator. They start with emotions, habits, and a brain that occasionally behaves like an excited golden retriever. Let's begin with one of the biggest reasons spending feels so good in the moment: dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical in your brain that's associated with pleasure and reward. Every time you anticipate getting something nice, your brain releases a little bit of it. It's the same system involved when you eat good food, hear your favorite song, or finally sit down after a long day at work. But here's the interesting part. Research shows that the dopamine spike often happens before the purchase, not after. In other words, the excitement of thinking about buying something can be stronger than the happiness of actually owning it. That's why browsing online stores late at night can feel strangely satisfying, even if you close the tab without buying anything. Your brain already enjoyed the preview. And companies know this very well. That's why online stores are designed to keep you browsing as long as possible. Endless scrolling, recommended items, customers also bought sections. All of it is carefully engineered to keep your brain in that little dopamine loop. You start by looking at one item, and 20 minutes later, you're comparing 6 different versions of something you swear you never wanted. Another fascinating part of spending psychology is how our brains treat small purchases. When people think about financial problems, they usually imagine large expenses: cars, rent, or big vacations. But in reality, a lot of money quietly disappears through small purchases that seem harmless on their own. A coffee here, a snack there, a quick online purchase because it was only $10. Individually, these decisions barely feel like spending. They're so small that your brain categorizes them as not worth worrying about. But when those tiny amounts repeat again and again, they can add up in surprising ways. Think of it like a tiny leak in a water bottle. 1 drop doesn't matter. 2 drops don't matter either. But if the bottle leaks slowly all day, you might eventually pick it up and wonder where half the water went. Now let's talk about another powerful factor in spending behavior: how we actually pay. The method you use to pay for something can dramatically change how much you spend. If you hand someone physical cash, something interesting happens. You feel a small psychological discomfort. Your brain registers the money leaving your hand, and it creates a subtle sense of loss. Some researchers even describe it as a mild pain of paying. But when you pay with a card, a phone, or a quick tap on a screen, that feeling is reduced. The money disappears digitally, which makes the transaction feel less real. It's fast, convenient, and emotionally smoother. Unfortunately, it also makes it easier to spend more than you intended. This is one of the reasons people often spend more when using credit cards compared to cash. It's not necessarily because they planned to spend more. It's because the psychological barrier is lower. The payment happens so quickly that the brain barely has time to question the decision. Now add modern technology into the mix, and things get even more interesting. Shopping used to require effort. You had to physically go to a store, find the item, and stand in line. That process gave your brain multiple opportunities to reconsider the purchase. Today, you can buy something while sitting on the couch in pajamas with one finger. The entire transaction takes less time than the 45-minute argument you'll have just to pick a movie on Netflix. Another major influence on spending behavior comes from our social environment, especially in the age of social media. Humans naturally compare themselves to others. It's something we've always done. But social media amplifies this instinct in a way that previous generations never experienced. When people scroll through their feeds, they see vacations, new gadgets, stylish outfits, beautiful homes, and perfectly arranged meals that look like they were designed by a team of professional artists. What we often forget is that these images represent highlights, not reality. Nobody posts pictures of their messy kitchen or the moment they realize they accidentally bought 3 different types of pasta because they were hungry while grocery shopping. Still, seeing those images repeatedly can subtly influence how we spend money. If everyone around you seems to be upgrading their lifestyle, it becomes easy to feel like you should be doing the same. Then there's the famous "I deserve this" mindset. After a long day of work or a stressful week, people often reward themselves with a purchase. Maybe it's food delivery, a small gadget, or something fun that wasn't originally planned. Rewarding yourself isn't inherently bad. In fact, enjoying life is an important part of managing money. The challenge appears when the reward becomes automatic. If every small accomplishment leads to a purchase, spending slowly becomes a habit rather than a conscious decision. Sales and discounts introduce another fascinating psychological twist. When people see a large discount, their brain focuses on how much money they are saving. The problem is that the brain sometimes forgets to ask a very important question. Did I actually need this item in the first place? A jacket that costs $100 but is discounted to $50 can feel like a fantastic deal. But if the jacket spends the next 3 years hanging untouched in the closet, the real saving was not $50. The real cost was $50 for something that never added value to your life. And retailers understand this psychology extremely well. That's why stores often display the original price next to the discounted price. Your brain sees the difference and feels like it's winning a small victory. There's also another subtle psychological trick happening during many purchases. We often underestimate the true cost of things. When people consider buying an item, they usually focus on the initial price. But many products come with additional costs over time. A car might require fuel, insurance, maintenance, and repairs. A gadget might require subscriptions, accessories, or upgrades. Because our brains are focused on the immediate price, these future costs often remain invisible during the decision-making process. Another interesting tendency is that people are surprisingly bad at estimating how much they spend in total. Ask someone how much they spent on small purchases last month, and most will give a number that feels reasonable. Then they check their bank statement and discover that the real number is considerably higher. This happens because the brain remembers major purchases clearly, but treats small expenses like background noise. Individually, they don't stand out, so they disappear from memory, even though they still affect your finances. The good news in all of this is that understanding the psychology of spending doesn't mean you have to stop enjoying money. The goal isn't to turn life into a joyless spreadsheet where every purchase requires a committee meeting and 3 financial advisors. Instead, awareness simply gives you more control. When you recognize why spending feels good, why certain situations trigger purchases, and how companies design environments that encourage buying, it becomes easier to pause for a moment before making a decision. Because at the end of the day, spending isn't just about numbers. It's about psychology, habits, and a brain that occasionally sees a candle that smells like mountain rain and decides that this is clearly the missing piece of your entire life.